I saw a post on a Facebook housing advice group a few weeks ago which kind of got me thinking. That's kind of stayed with me a little bit. And it was basically involving a situation where I think a mum had been in private rented accommodation. The private rented accommodation was terrible by all accounts, lots of damp and mould and other kind of disrepair issues. The mum had basically tried to get the landlord to carry out improvements, carry out some sort of work on it, which they had basically refused to do. And so the mum made the legally foolish decision to stop paying the rent. And then the landlord basically evicted them. And so she came to the Facebook group basically saying, what do I do? And I didn't see a single helpful response to her. Everything was basically like, you idiot, you deserve everything that's coming to you. You deserve to be homeless. What else did you expect? That kind of thing. And it was interesting that whatever caused that emotion in those responses basically seemed to kind of mean that they couldn't see the actual legal answer. Because actually, from a legal point of view, and this isn't what the video is about, but legally speaking, not paying the rent for 9 months isn't actually enough to be found intentionally homeless. The council would need to be satisfied that the property was reasonable to continue to occupy, where, if you've got bad damp and mould problems, potentially it wouldn't be. So it's not, they're not guaranteed to be intentionally homeless anyway. And obviously, even if they were found intentionally homeless, they would be referred to children's services, because you can't have homeless kids out in the street, and the kids can't be removed from the mum for that reason. But this whole kind of idea of homelessness being someone's just desert, people deserve to be homeless, people do stupid things, being homeless is kind of a necessary punishment or a proportionate punishment to make them act better in future. It made me think of a few things I read over the years, actually going back to a thing I remember from school. So I did GCSE history, and I remember learning about World War I reparations. So after the war, Germany had this huge debt. And there was this cartoon, I'll put it up on the screen actually. So there's this horse and cart, and there's so much on the cart that it's basically tipping the cart up and the horse can no longer touch the floor. And then you've got these two farmers who represent England and France basically saying, maybe if we let the horse actually touch the ground, they'll be able to pull the cart. And so I kind of see that kind of thing with homelessness. If you use homelessness as some kind of discipline for people to make them learn, what happens more often than not is that they get so overwhelmed by being homeless, they get harmed so much by being homeless, that they not only can kind of figure out what it was they needed to figure out in the first place, but they also kind of end up in a much worse situation. There's a lot of research around poverty, how poverty in general, which would include homelessness, essentially affects people's IQ, as in people who are undergoing significant stress perform significantly worse on things like IQ tests. And it's because their brain power is taken up by worrying about all these kind of stressful things they've got to worry about, and it basically takes up the energy they would otherwise be using to problem solve and learn and all that kind of stuff. So homelessness is definitely not a good teacher in that sense. It doesn't kind of teach people to act better in future, it probably just kind of makes them worse. And it also made me think of a book I read ages ago called Madness and Civilization by Michel Foucault. And in it he talks about how back in the day they would use very harsh punishments as a way of trying to teach people to act better. And actually it kind of talks about the mentality back in the sort of 18th and 19th centuries, where that a naughty human being was like a horse. You just got to break them and you've got to hit them hard enough, and eventually they'll kind of learn to do better. And actually what we know now about psychology is that definitely isn't the way to teach people. They don't learn that way. You have to be supportive, you have to put kind of supportive stuff around someone to help them learn through the process. And basically overwhelming someone with something like homelessness is not a way to teach them anything really. And it also made me think of a training I did 15 years ago, it must have been. Actually when I worked at Bedford Borough Council, so I organised this and put it out there for local stakeholders. And I'm pretty sure it was the first time I met John Allen, who I set Just Us up with actually. So it's called Reducing Evictions from Supported Accommodation or something like that. It was a great trainer called Colin Dyson. I don't know if he'd still be active, but I remember him talking about this example of supported accommodation. You've got someone living there and they're playing their music too loudly and it's kind of annoying other residents, and so you give them a warning and they keep playing music loudly, so they give them another warning, now they're evicted. And Colin was basically saying, is that the best way we have to try and kind of get this person to act more socially? And he says, well, actually, there are some other options for that supported accommodation provider. There's no reason why they couldn't basically report it to environmental health, who would be able to come and get involved and would be able to potentially confiscate the sound equipment. That seems to be a more proportionate way to deal with someone who's being antisocial by being noisy, rather than just having this kind of default, we'll just evict everyone for everything. And that obviously resonated with me. That was really helpful for me to kind of see things differently. I certainly worked at the night shelter before I worked in the council, where there was a really draconian rule system. And we just thought that homelessness, we were so used to homelessness or seeing homelessness, that we just kind of saw it as a way of just kind of teaching people and kind of, you know, making people behave better. I think because we basically thought, you know, we have individuals who've been homeless many times before, so what's another week homeless, you know, if they break the rules, you know, that'll make them follow the rules next time they're in. And of course it doesn't. It does a lot of harm, puts people at a risk of a lot more harm. It's just a horrible way of working. But it seems that that kind of philosophy and ideology in the sector is quite prevalent. I would guess it's the same kind of thing that I saw in this Facebook group, where there was these responses which were, as I say, seem to be very emotional, but also just based on this idea that if someone does something stupid, then being homeless is a proportionate punishment for them, rather than thinking, actually, yeah, you might have done something stupid, we don't know the full details, but let's kind of try and find some way of kind of you getting through this so that you're not left homeless with some kids and, you know, kind of having to knock on social services door or something. There must be, yeah, there's probably other things that we could do there.